We often think of November 11, 1918, as the day the Great War ended, a moment of profound peace. But for millions across Eastern Europe, that date marked not an end, but the fiery beginning of a brutal, chaotic, and often forgotten chapter of conflicts. Alright friends, let's talk about the end of World War I. For many of us in the West, we picture joyous celebrations, soldiers returning home, and a collective sigh of relief as the guns finally fell silent. And that's largely true for places like France, Britain, and even Germany, which, despite its defeat, saw a formal end to the massive trench warfare. But what if I told you that for a huge swath of Europe, particularly the East, the armistice wasn't an end to war but merely a pivot point into an even more complex, brutal, and often ideologically charged set of conflicts? Today, we're diving into that tumultuous period, the years immediately following the Great War, when the collapse of vast empires, primarily the Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and German, created an immense power vacuum. This wasn't a peaceful transition, it was a free-for-all, a scramble for power and independence that would reshape the map and cost millions more lives. We're going to explore the sprawling Russian Civil War, which dragged on for years after 1918, and how it intertwined with the desperate struggles of nations like Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to carve out their own existence. It's a story of reds, whites, greens, Freikorps, and a whole lot of bloodshed. Let's start with the big one, the elephant in the room that overshadowed everything else. The Russian Civil War, 1917 to 1923, Now, officially, it kicks off in 1917 with the Bolshevik Revolution, but its most brutal and widespread phase really exploded, the First World War ended. Imagine this. Russia had already pulled out of WW1 in early 1918 with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, a humiliating peace deal that ceded massive territories. But that didn't bring peace internally. Quite the opposite. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, had seized power in October 1917, promising peace, land, and bread, but they immediately faced immense opposition. On one side, you had the Reds, the Bolsheviks, and their newly formed Red Army, committed to establishing a communist state. On the other, the Whites, a diverse and often fractious coalition of anti-Bolshevik forces. We're talking monarchists, conservatives, liberals, socialists who opposed the Bolsheviks, and anyone else who wanted to see the communist experiment fail. Their only real unifying factor was their hatred of the Bolsheviks, which, ironically, was often their undoing. Add to this mix the Greens' decentralized peasant armies, often fighting both Reds and Whites to protect their local interests in various anarchist movements like Nestor Makhno's Black Army in Ukraine, and you have a recipe for utter chaos. And it wasn't just an internal affair. The Allied powers, Britain, France, the United States, Japan, saw the Bolsheviks as a dangerous, destabilizing force and a betrayal of the war effort against Germany. So, they intervened, sending troops, supplies, and financial aid to the White armies. Their motivations were mixed. Some wanted to reopen the Eastern Front against Germany, others wanted to protect their investments, and many simply feared the spread of communism. This foreign intervention, however, was often half-hearted, poorly coordinated, and, in many cases, actually fueled anti-Western sentiment and bolstered the Reds' narrative of fighting off foreign invaders. This war was utterly brutal. The Red Terror, a campaign of political repression and executions carried out by the Bolshevik secret police, the Cheka, was met with similar atrocities by the White armies. Famine ravaged the countryside, exacerbated by both sides requisitioning food. Millions died, not just from combat, but from disease, starvation, and political violence. By 1922, with the last significant White forces pushed out and a peace treaty signed with Poland, the Red Army had largely secured control, leading to the formal establishment of the Soviet Union in late 1922. The victory of the Bolsheviks cemented communism's hold on a vast empire, setting the stage for much of 20th century history. But while this epic struggle raged, other nations were fighting for their very existence in Russia's shadow. Let's shift our gaze northwest to Finland. Finland had been an autonomous Grand Duchy within the Russian Empire for over a century. When the Russian Revolution hit in 1917, they quickly seized the opportunity, declaring independence in December 1917. But, much like Russia itself, Finland immediately plunged into a brutal civil war of its own in January 1918. Here, the lines were drawn between the Reds, socialist and communist workers, often inspired by their Bolshevik neighbors, and the Whites, conservatives, agrarians, and anti-socialist forces, led by the formidable General C.G.E. Mannerheim. The Finnish Reds initially had some backing from Bolshevik Russia, but the Whites received crucial military support from Imperial Germany, which saw an opportunity to establish a friendly state on Russia's border. The fighting was incredibly fierce, marked by atrocities from both sides, including mass executions. Within just a few months, By May 1918, the White forces, aided by German troops, decisively defeated the Reds. Finland emerged as an independent, parliamentary republic, but the scars of that civil war ran deep through its society for decades. Now, let's move south, along the Baltic Sea to the Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian Wars of Independence, 1918 to 1920, These three small nations, historically caught between the Russian, German, and Polish spheres of influence, faced an even more complicated and multi-front struggle. They had also declared independence in the chaos of 1918, but their declarations were just the beginning. Estonia declared independence in February 1918. Their fight for freedom quickly became a two-front war. On one side, they faced the invading Red Army, trying to reassert Soviet control. On the other, they had to contend with the Baltische Landeswehr, a volunteer force composed primarily of Baltic Germans, who initially had German military backing and sought to establish their own German-dominated state in the region. Estonia, though small, put up a fierce resistance, receiving vital naval support from the British and even some volunteers from Finland. The Estonians managed to push back both the Red Army and the Landeswehr, eventually signing a peace treaty with Soviet Russia in February 1920, which officially recognized Estonian independence. It was a remarkable achievement for such a small nation. Next, Latvia, Latvia's struggle was perhaps the most convoluted. Imagine trying to fight 4 or 5 enemies at once. After declaring independence in November 1918, the Latvian provisional government faced an immediate invasion by the Red Army, which established a Soviet Latvian government. But the Red Army wasn't the only threat. Just like Estonia, Latvia had to deal with the Baltische Landeswehr, and an even more formidable German-Russian, irregular force known as the West Russian Volunteer Army, or the Bermontian Army, led by Pavel Bermondt-Avalov. These were essentially German Freikorps, soldiers, and former White Russian officers who aimed to establish German dominance in the Baltics and potentially join the Russian Civil War. Latvia's national forces, initially small and poorly equipped, fought valiantly, sometimes allied with Estonians, sometimes fighting against former allies. The situation was constantly shifting, with territories changing hands multiple times. Eventually, with critical assistance from Polish and Estonian forces, and continued British naval support, the Latvian forces managed to defeat both the Bermontians and the Red Army. Soviet Russia recognized Latvian independence in August 1920. It was a victory forged in an almost impossible environment. Finally, Lithuania, Lithuania's path to independence, declared in February 1918, was also fraught with multiple conflicts. They faced invasions from the Red Army, much like their northern neighbors, but they also had to contend with the Bermontian Army, and, uniquely, a significant conflict with newly independent Poland. Poland and Lithuania both claimed the city of Wilno to the Poles, which had a mixed population but was historically significant to both nations. This dispute led to armed clashes and, ultimately, Polish annexation of Vilnius, a wound that would fester between the two nations for decades. Show a map highlighting the Vilnius dispute between Poland and Lithuania. Despite these multi-front struggles, often with limited outside help compared to Estonia and Latvia, Lithuania eventually secured its independence from Soviet Russia in July 1920, though the Vilnius question remained unresolved. So, what do we take away from all this? First, the notion that WW1 simply ended in 1918 is deeply misleading for Eastern Europe. The collapse of empires didn't bring peace. It unleashed a torrent of localized, national, and ideological conflicts that would collectively cost millions more lives and forever change the geopolitical landscape. These wars were brutal laboratories for new forms of warfare and political repression. They saw the rise of modern nationalism, the clash between nascent communist ideology and various forms of democracy and authoritarianism, and the desperate fight for self-determination against overwhelming odds. The courage and sacrifice of the Finnish, Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian peoples in defending their newly declared states are truly remarkable. As they fought for their very existence against powerful internal and external foes, the peace that finally settled over this region in the early 1920s was fragile, built on shifting sands. Many of the territorial disputes and ideological tensions born in this tumultuous period would continue to echo, setting the stage for future conflicts, particularly World War II. These aren't just footnotes to the Great War. They are essential chapters in understanding the violent birth of modern Eastern Europe. What do you think was the most surprising aspect of these post-WW1 conflicts? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this dive into history insightful, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Smiles and waves at the camera.